Welcome to K-Wave. I'm Hong Bin Jung, your South Korean living right here in Singapore, bringing you all you have to know about the Hallyu fever or the Korean wave. And it's K-influencer today. And today I want to introduce a new podcast series by the Straits Times. It's a six-part series that explores the recent true crimes that gripped those in Asia. And the first episode is already out and it takes place in South Korea. The episode takes us back to 2019 when the nation was taken aback by the shocking news of a criminal case that trapped girls in a digital prison. This new podcast is investigating deep into these tragedies, the trauma that has left a mark on their victims, and this new podcast aims to expose the dark side of societies. It's called True Crimes of Asia. And on K Influencer today, I am very excited to be joined by those working on this new podcast series. We have Ernest Luis, who is a podcast editor, Tam Mei, who's executive producer for True Crimes of Asia, and Chang May Choon, who's the Straits Times South Korea correspondent. Ernest, Tam, and May Choon, welcome to the show.
Hi.
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 Hello.
Hi. Okay, let me just start with Ernest here. Tell us more about this True Crime podcast.
Yeah, basically, it's one of our special edition podcast series that we try and do once or twice a year. And we've been
Okay.
trying it for the last 2 years or so. And we had an award winning series last year, which was Unsolved Mysteries of Southeast Asia. So you can check that out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. But this one, True Crimes of Asia, I remember it started off about like 5 months ago, actually. We were talking
Okay.
with my colleague, foreign editor Bagya. And then Tam Mei, we got involved with her as well to how to shape this, you see. So actually, True Crimes of Asia is a 6-part special edition series, and it explores recent resolved crime cases, and it's more than just the dramatic retelling of the crime case or, the facts and the narrative that went behind it. It's actually about bringing out the issues that afflict societies in Asia. And in many of these crime cases, right, it happened at that time. And there are some still lingering issues even till this day. So
Right.
that's what we found interesting. And we wanted to bring that element out in this podcast series. Yeah.
Okay, so Tem, what was the inspiration behind starting this new podcast series?
So for me, I actually started out as a crime reporter in Singapore. So
Okay.
I've kind of always had interest in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I used to ask myself, beyond, all the grim details that we get as reporters,
Mm-hmm.
what is the bigger issue or what was the main cause of, a crime? It can't just be it happened for no reason, right?
Right.
And personally, I'm also a fan of true crime, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
books, shows, or
Yeah.
podcasts. And I think one day I was listening to a true crime podcast. I remember now that I'm based in Thailand, I was just listening to it and doing my
Mm-hmm.
laundry and I remember it was about the Adrian Lim murders in
Mm.
Singapore in 1980s. And I remember thinking to myself that, we have so many colleagues in the newsroom or who are based in countries who have covered big cases like this. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they can speak with people who have insight, and I thought, why don't we start something? We have all these people and knowledgeable and talented colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't just want to focus on, the grisly details. We thought
Right.
it'd be good to use the case to help people understand society, understand how things have changed, or like Ernest said, some things have not changed. So
Right.
that's really the thrust. Yeah.
So, I mean, your first episode starts off in South Korea, right? Is there a reason why South Korea was chosen as the first country to explore this series?
Because May Choon was the sacrificial lamb. But I mean, yeah, but it is difficult to get print journalists to think in terms of scripts and podcasts. So it's really kudos to her for giving it a try
Mhm.
and really entering this uncharted territory. So
I see.
yeah, but I think when we first talked about all the different stories, like I spoke to different colleagues in different
Mhm.
desks, I mean different countries, and she came back with this case, and Ernest and I did discuss, we wanted something impactful,
Right.
something to really highlight, um, a concern, and for
Mhm.
Matron's, the case that Matron brought for us was really still a big concern, and there
Mhm.
were still ripples happening, other enthromes appearing,
Yeah.
and yeah, there was a bit of this twist on that Korean love story that people always think about. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and the details of the case, although they are quite hard to hear, I think
Mhm.
they really do capture the attention. So that's why we went with South Korea first. Yeah.
And the
Okay,
other thing
okay.
that is interesting about this one, the South Korean
Mhm.
episode, is unlike normal when you mention true crimes to most people, right? We
Right.
think about like murders and all
Mm.
these usual kind of
Yeah.
genres that they are categorized in. Digital sex crimes is new. It's something
Mhm.
Mm.
that will become more prevalent. I think as we recorded the episode, we were thinking, I don't think this could happen and stop just in South Korea.
Right.
It could happen elsewhere in the world. Yeah.
Mhm. I
Mm.
mean, so the first episode in question, of course, it explores one of South Korea's notorious cases. It's called the Nth Room Scandal. So, Mei-chun, maybe tell us more about this case?
Okay, without going into too much details,
Mhm.
basically this is a series of chat rooms on
Yeah.
Telegram, and what they do in the chat rooms is share sexually exploitative visuals and videos. And it started out, I think, with just secretly taken images, and later on it went on to they actually kept a digital prison for
Mhm.
young women where
Right.
they forced the young women to do certain things,
Mhm.
and then the images were actually sold to some of the members of the group.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and in the end, the mastermind, he
Mhm.
was caught. He was found that he had forced 74 victims, many of
Mm.
them who were minors, into this digital prison. He had 38 accomplices. So how he managed to do all these, you would have to tune in to get all the details.
We'll have to tune in for that. But I mean, is there a reason why you chose this particular case for this episode? Is there a message you'd like to send?
When Tommy asked me about true crimes, I was thinking actually, to be honest, there are a lot of very
Mm.
disturbing crime cases happening in South Korea,
Right.
and they become material for you to make
Mhm.
movies and
Mhm.
dramas, crime dramas, and
Right.
all that. And I've covered quite a few.
Mhm.
Not sure whether you're aware, like the umbrella
Mm.
murderer, and then that there are like series of child rapists and all that. So
Mhm.
this one struck out at me most because I think this can happen anywhere.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not just South
Yep.
Korea. So if we choose one that is very peculiar to South Korea, our listeners, our readers might not relate to it so much, but this is something that you can imagine happening in
Mhm.
Singapore, and that's why I hope that through this our readers and our listeners will be more aware of digital sex crimes happening around us, and girls especially
Mhm.
will know not to fall prey to it.
Mm,
Mm.
and I mean, once you also delve deeper into this case, were there any surprises or things that you discovered along the way other than what you already knew about this case?
So the thing was, I reached out to interviewees.
Mhm.
So I reached out to one of the two women who first stumbled upon it, and
Okay.
then they managed to investigate enough, and they
Mhm.
wrote a article about it. And
Mm.
that article actually triggered a series of media investigations that
Right.
eventually pushed the police to go
Mm.
investigate, and finally they cracked the case.
Mhm.
Um, and I also spoke to activists who actually monitor what's happening online,
Mhm.
in Telegram, in Discord, and other chat rooms and websites that are frequented
Mhm.
by men for sexual material.
Mm.
So I've read enough and covered it enough back in 2019 when it happened, but
Mhm.
now talking to them again, everything seems so real. Like they're telling me things that like they are doing now. When they go
Yeah.
onto the websites, they're seeing all these things still up there. So you
Mhm.
get the sense that 4 years have passed, but it seems
Yeah.
nothing much has changed, and
Right.
that is very, very, very disturbing.
Yeah. Oh, that is very disturbing. I feel like you can never erase once, you can never really erase something that you put online. And I think this is also the same case here. I mean, the nth room case is one of the biggest cases in South Korea, but it's not uncommon. I think back when I was in university, I mean, this case happened after I graduated from university, but while I was in university, I think one of the biggest cases were that involved sexual content over like messaging apps was it involved one of the top all three of the top universities, and there were students just taking photos and exploiting freshmen of universities, and that went very viral once it got exposed. So I mean, what does this kind of say about South Korea to you behind all of that romance of, K-drama and the music of K-pop culture? Like, what does this say about South Korea with all these, true crimes?
When I talk to the activists,
Mhm,
there's this one thing that really stuck in my head.
mhm,
When I asked them about why are digital sex crimes so prevalent in South
mhm,
Korea, and then they all attribute it to the low status of women in this country, gender inequality, and how
mhm,
women here are treated as accessories. They're not like,
mm,
even the body doesn't belong to them. They're objectified, turned into
right.
sex objects.
Mm,
And the way the men approach it is so casual. Like,
mhm,
like it's the most natural thing on earth for a man to do. And
right.
when women are treated this way,
Mhm,
you don't feel safe. You definitely don't feel
mhm,
safe in this country.
mm,
I mean, yes, you can go out at night. The streets are quite safe, but as a woman, you know that when you
mhm,
go out there, if there are, like, people getting drunk in the streets, or you go somewhere clubbing and whatever,
mhm.
you never know what will happen.
Right.
Yeah.
I think when you say it's safe to go out at night, usually when I was back in Korea, I did not feel safe at all because of all these stories that I've heard. Um, but I mean, South Korea, it does have its own, problems. But I heard before we started this interview that you kind of felt a different way after, or you felt kind of sad after you finished this podcast.
Yeah. So for me, when I did the podcast, choosing all the sound bites to use, and then when I
Mm,
was scripting, I had to go over what is said over and over and over again.
mm,
And sometimes it gets to you, when you're
mm,
reading through all the what they've said, and then
mhm.
when you are reading it, it's reading out aloud. It's
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Mhm,
And then with the music coming in, it affects
mhm.
your mood even more.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
Right.
remember
and
when she was doing the reflection, right, at the end, and
Mhm,
we chose a particular music to bring out that feeling
mhm.
as she's
yeah.
reflecting on all her 8 years in Korea so far. I
Yeah.
think she was pretty emotional, no? And that took
Mm,
Mm,
us aback also, because we have to let our journalists have time to, because they feel it, you see, it suddenly comes back, and, and,
of
and then it
course.
rises up in the form of emotion. So
Mhm,
yeah, it was
mm,
pretty. It's a strong podcast, I would say, and
mhm.
it's you have to really take the time to listen to it. Yeah.
Mhm, I hope that people who do listen to this podcast can feel the sadness that comes through Mei Chun's voice as well. But speaking of audios and sound bites, Ernest, there's a
Yes.
lot of audio and sound bites, I believe, in this podcast episode, including the mastermind behind this case, Cho Ju Bin's voice. Were there any challenges choosing these sound bites, especially it being in Korean, to tell this story better?
Not really. I mean, Cho Jubin actually, when he came out in public to speak, right, and that
Yeah.
was the interesting one for us. When Mei Chun
Mm,
said, "Okay, so this is the part that we need to take," right, and when
mhm,
we have to find a colleague to do the translation into
mhm.
English, we had to listen to Cho Jubin's voice over and over again. I remember we
Right.
listened to it like 20, 30 times, right? And we realized,
Mm.
right, this guy has no sense of, there's no sense of remorse. He's
Mhm.
The tone of his voice is basically, yeah, I just paid I just paid 150 for this cup of coffee. That
Mm.
kind of tone, no
Mm.
sense of remorse and all. So we had to like accurately try and reflect that in the English
Mhm.
version. And I think the sound bites, of course, the Korean interviews, they were done entirely in Korean with the activists and all that, with May Choon in person. So she managed to get them kindly. They spoke to us, and then we just found different people in the newsroom to do the voiceovers as well. Yeah. So I would say that actually for this episode, if I did a correct count, we had about 9 colleagues to do all the different voiceover parts plus narration, including Mei Chun and all that. And
And my husband.
even Mei Chun's husband was
Wow.
roped in as well. So
Okay.
yeah, interestingly, he stars at the start of the podcast, so he has to like he has to replicate those actual things that went on in the nth room. Yeah,
Okay.
we may smile at it while now we're talking, but it's actually very real and very gripping stuff, and it's quite disgusting. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
But were there any troubles getting these interviewees who actually were the victims of this case?
We didn't get any victims. We got
Mm.
mostly like activists. So
Okay.
when they came in to talk to us, even they felt at certain times when we asked questions, I could feel like they were getting a bit worked up. Like they were
Yeah.
getting angry and and
Mhm.
and feeling there's this sense of helplessness. Like they
Right.
are all. I've only spoken to women.
Mhm.
Naturally for this
Mm.
story, so they'll tell me stories like, oh, you think that after 4 years, um, it won't be happening so often. But one of them
Mhm.
was saying that just the other day it happened again, a friend, and then then she
Oh,
goes
no.
on, yeah, and then it relates to I think I was telling Tam Mei this, even when the crowd crash in Itaewon happened,
Mhm.
yeah, so there were victims and all that, right? So
Mhm.
so on these websites, the men were sharing pictures of victims and making comments about the female
Oh my
victims.
goodness.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
really, I don't know, it's very out of this world. Like when you hear all
Mhm.
this and it's actually happening in real life, and it's not some drama, it's
Mhm.
Yeah,
yes,
and there's still an element of danger for some of the activists, right? Like some of them asked to be
Right.
masked, their voice, don't use their real
mm,
name. So there's still some
yeah.
element of danger for people who speak out about these issues. So that's also a bit, yeah, sad, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
I just got
Yeah.
chills over my body. I really am very speechless of how, things are unraveling and things are continuing to happen, even though, this case actually brought light to what was actually going behind the scenes, behind all the K-drama, behind all the K-pop industry, behind all the romance and the good stuff. But, Ernest, you talked about having so many people working together,
Mm-hmm.
for this podcast series, for this in-house, for this special series for the Straits Times. How did you make this happen? Were a lot of people keen on this kind of series?
Okay, first we have to get the boss of Tam Mei to agree, and then after that we have to find the person who's willing to make this happen and coordinate with
Mhm,
me, and that's Tam Mei. So she became like the executive producer,
mhm,
and the executive producer's job actually in this case is to really to find all the so-called actors, right? And
mm,
the actors are in our cases the journalists and the podcast.
mhm,
So a lot of them have their own things to do. They have to write stories. They might have to feature in videos. They have to do a lot of multifaceted things that a journalist would do
mhm,
these days. And on top of this, we have to then convince them that it's good to make a series like this because it's a series that will stand the test of time. It's going to
mm,
be there forever on your audio platforms, and if you put the effort into it,
mhm,
it's going to be worth it. But at the time,
mm,
right, and then a lot of my editorial colleagues are usually they'll be okay. How much work goes into it? So there is a podcast that lasts like say maybe 25 minutes, but you don't know how much work goes into it because Mei Chun found it out, and she spent about like 12 hours. So the thing is, myself, Mei Chun, Tam Mei, you can hear our voices. We don't sound as nice as you, Hong Bin,
mhm,
right? The thing is, you're professionally trained. You do this like 3 hours a day, 360 days a year. Whereas
mhm,
the most of our time is spent writing stories. So our voices are not as great as yours. But vocal cords are like a muscle, right? You need to exercise it. So we had to put Mei Choon through voice exercises. And every week, once a week, we will go through her voice, we will record her voice, and then on her own daily exercises, she'll be doing it. Yeah,
I
so that
see.
she had to do all this, and then finally she spent about 12 to 13 hours just to narrate maybe 25 minutes worth, and she's
Oh.
She still
narrating
does her
over and
daily
over
work.
again.
Still does daily work. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, and
goodness.
she's
So a lot of
yeah,
work has gone into this. So I think everyone who are listening right
yes.
now should check this podcast out. Which, speaking of which, Tam, the first episode is out today on South Korea, and the next episode takes us to Thailand. What can we expect from Thailand?
Okay, I won't say too much. I mean, I hope you go and listen to it. But
Yes.
when I first heard about this case, I was really pretty shocked myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, about a decade ago,
Mm.
authorities in Thailand actually found thousands of fetuses hidden in a
Okay.
temple in Bangkok. So it's not some faraway province, but it's right
Mm.
in Bangkok, and they were meant for cremation. And
Mm.
after a while, they discovered that these were actually the result of illegal abortions that were taking
Mm-hmm.
place during a time in Thailand when abortion was really a serious taboo.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I wanted to highlight this case because I thought, we have come so far in terms of mindsets, in terms of how
Mm-hmm.
we think about maybe more controversial subjects like abortion. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of debate about it in the US, and I think it's in Asia as well. And
Mm.
I thought it'd be good to highlight, what was a turning point for Thailand, and how today there's still some challenges, even though
Mm.
things have changed for the better. And yeah, so that's really what it's about. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that teaser. That is sure some next episode that I do want to check out as well. Well, where can we find all these episodes, guys?
So you can get them on Apple Podcasts, Google
Mm-hmm.
Podcasts, and Spotify, and most
Mm.
importantly, the Straits Times website. Yeah.
Okay. So the first episode is out already today. When can we expect the next few episodes to come out?
Next month.
Yeah, it's on
Which
the
day? I
fourth.
can't
I mean,
remember.
just to make it easy for everyone, it's out
Mm-hmm.
on the fourth Tuesday of every month from now
Fourth
till
Tuesday.
September. So every fourth
Well,
Tuesday, just lock it in your diary. True Crimes of Asia.
okay.
Set
Well,
the
thank
alarm.
you
Yeah.
so much, guys.
Thank you,
Okay.
Hongbin.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
you.
if you guys want to check this podcast series out, the first episode is already out. It's on South Korea, and you can access these episodes when you search True Crimes of Asia either on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And episodes drop every fourth Tuesday of the month from today. So, get notifications of new episodes on your favorite audio apps, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, when you follow ST's True Crimes of Asia. There are 6 episodes in total, with the first, of course, bringing you to South Korea. So thank you again for all of you guys joining me today. I've been speaking to Ernest Luis, who is the podcast editor at the Straits Times, Tam Mei, who's executive producer for True Crimes of Asia, as well as the correspondent for Thailand, and Chang May Choon, who is the Straits Times correspondent for South Korea. I'm Hongbin Jung, and this has been K-Influencers on K-Wave, right here on Money FM 89.3.
Money FM 89.3.